I just feel like talking from the heart. And whoever decides to listen, thank you for taking the time. I pray that this message brings you peace, clarity, understanding, and fearlessness. So I was thinking about insecurities. I was thinking about my insecurities. I was thinking about I'm thinking about all these things because over the years since I decided to take some time, air quotes, offline, I wanted to put all of my stuff on the table and deal with it, right? And I've been trying to, like, I was looking at all this stuff that I was dealing with emotionally. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would have to record everything that my heart was saying to me while I was asleep. And then I would get an epiphany, a revelation. And I'm like, that's where that came from. Oh my goodness, I can't believe this is the reason why I thought like that. So I know none of us get to a stage where we'll ever be perfect. But I wanted to get to a stage where I was more real. Because I was never taught to express myself or express myself in my rarest, truest form. I remember being a child being so afraid to ask my dad for some things. I remember it was a big deal for me to ask for my high school pictures. I just had anxiety because there was this worthlessness that I felt. I felt so worthless, like I felt like I couldn't even get my own high school graduation pictures, which I didn't even push the issue. Somewhere along in my childhood, I learned um, that I wasn't important. So I didn't want to express myself. I always wanted to give my energy to others because I was so insecure. I was so insecure. I learned this. And I don't think it wasn't like my parents purposely wanted me to feel this way. I think it was something that was generational because maybe they didn't get a certain level of attention, so they could only pass down to me what they had to offer. And I felt neglected. I felt like I had no voice. And on top of not having a voice, I was put down for who I was. I was constantly reminded of how fat I was. And if that's all people could see, then it made me feel worthless. How could you see the real me if that's all that's being acknowledged? And I realized that I made myself a victim because if no one was going to protect me, I had to feel sorry for me. I had to protect me. I had to love me. And I took on this victim mentality. If nobody would shed tears for me, I would shed tears for myself. And let me tell you something, that is a terrible way to think about life. I also remember, I'm just going over some insecurities. I also remember, I forgot what I was about to say. I also remember, oh, I lost track of thought. I lost track of what I was saying. But I became a victim to myself. I became a victim with no voice. And the voice that I only could show people is the voice that I thought that would be pleasing to others. So, somewhere along the line, I learned a couple of words. I learned to articulate myself that in a way that sounds pleasing to others, and I shut myself down. I taught myself through what I saw and through what I felt that I should always be in the background. So it turned me into this huge people pleaser. And I just couldn't express all of my words. Oh, I had a lot to say, but I wasn't really sharing a whole lot. Oh, this is another thing that I was saying. So I became somehow throughout the years very idealistic. And as a poet, I'm not going to lie, I can write all day about romance. I could imagine things in my head when I would start to meet people, and I could project this love. I was always hoping that people had that same kind of love that I had in my heart. And it made me, I was living in another world, in a completely different world, because the world is not all, roses and sunshine. And I wanted the world to be like that because that was the experience that I was always searching for. I think it was my insecurities that led me to feel this way, led me to feel like I could create a world in my mind that would somehow become real. But in reality, this life is harsh. In reality, most people, if you let them, they'll take and take and take and take in several ways. And all of it relates back to your energy. I didn't realize that I was growing up to still be a scared little girl who was insecure, who was fearless and fearful at the same time. Because I could always go out there and do some crazy stuff. I could always go out there and speak on these stages, and yet in my subconscious mind, I was holding all of this fear because it brought me back to my childhood, because secretly I thought that I didn't deserve my dreams. I thought that I wasn't worthy of my dream home. That's why it took me so long to even apply for a mortgage. And as soon as I applied, I got approved like almost the same day. When I got my new car, the car was delivered to me the next day after, the same day I was approved for it. It was delivered. There were certain things I just didn't want to try because I was avoiding life because of insecurity. So while this time I was away, I just constantly wanted to unpack, because I just didn't want to be like this pretty face who's saying these nice things. And I meant a lot of anything I expressed to you guys with love, I meant that. I really did. But there were a lot of times I was just so hopeful, and life is not always hopeful. Life is not always sweet. Life is not always kind. And don't get me wrong, I was not completely delusional, but I had an overly optimistic point of view of life. And I projected that optimism on people, and people didn't always have that same energy. What am I saying? What is Constance saying tonight? Well, if I come to you, I just want to be real. Because there's so many things that I want to say to all of you, this raw and kind of gritty. And I just can't be that person that holds her words anymore. Just can't be that person who only says a part of their truth. Y'all don't know how much hurt and pain I've been holding inside my heart over the years, and how vulnerable and insecure I have been. But even in my vulnerability and insecurity, there was still a lot of strength there, because there was a lot of things that I had to get through. I had to learn people. Most of all, I had to learn myself. I had to unpack. And a lot of the things I unpacked, I'm like, can you believe that? Am I really dealing with that? And let me tell you something, like the revelation comes like when I'm sleeping and I'm in that state where there's nothing on my mind. And then I'll be taken back to why I behave a certain way. I would be taken back to why, and I would just want to cry. How could I become this person? Not to say I'm a terrible person, but I just didn't understand how broken I was. How broken I still am. And I love that I'm putting the pieces together. And that's what I've been working on myself. I didn't want to admit that I was broken. I didn't want to admit that my heart was hurting, not just from one thing, but from several things from my childhood. And it's like sometimes you just block things out. But when I block things out, it was always like I was carrying these weights on my back. And it's like these different weights had different names on them. And over the years, the recent years that I've been doing the self-work, it's just like I would take a weight and finally be able to get it off my back, and the weight would have like a word or a phrase on it. And the weight would say, this is what attributed to this in your life. This is what attributed to that in your life. This is what attributed to this. And it's just been me and the Most High going through this process. I remember a couple of years ago, I fell into a deep depression, but I was too embarrassed to admit it. I was severely depressed. I was the kind of depressed where you're doing enough to get by. And so I went to counseling, and this one person that was a counselor, she was a young lady. She didn't get me. She didn't know how. She wasn't empathetic. She was mechanical. Then I went to another counselor, and he told me, he was like, you don't want to be a Black woman on the streets. So toughen up and just work and get through it. This was a white man. It was crazy. It was like I was getting what I always got. Someone denying my feelings. Someone denying my truth. So I went back to the Most High and just dealt with the Most High on things. I was wondering, where was all this pain coming from? I had to have an answer. I had to have a release for these blockages in my life, because I sincerely wanted to move forward. I guess this message is about insecurities. And what I can say is that I have been protected at a high level. All praises to the Most High. Because as I was vulnerable like a little child, the Most High protected me. The divine creator shielded me. My angels were with me. They were really rocking with me. Because someone who was that vulnerable could be susceptible to anything. And I'm not saying I would take anything in terms of relationship, in terms of people, because I shut people down quickly. But it took some hurt to get there. What I'm saying is, I want to flip this. So I finally put a lot of my stuff on the table, and I'm like, I'm dealing with this stuff. And at first, I wasn't dealing with it well. Like I said, I was depressed. I went through some spiritual attacks. Some people that I was dealing with spiritually attacked me. But all these things opened me up to who I really was. So everything has its purpose. So it was good, even though it was bad. I don't know if any of you ever experienced spiritual attacks. And if you are empathic, or if you are a highly sensitive person, or if you are sensitive to spirits, is no joke when you feel those things or when you experience certain things. But I'm grateful because every piece of pain that I experienced helped me to get closer to my identity. Like I was speaking in the other video, everything was about attacking the root, attacking my identity. So if the enemy could get me to feel a certain way as a child, then my whole life would be a wash. Because if the enemy, and it's just not a he, these are various spirits, demons, and all kinds of stuff. But if I could believe the lie, I would never succeed to be Constance. I could never be my authentic self if I was so focused on the lie. I'm saying this to say that we all have insecurities, and there's always a root. And I know when you go digging up this stuff, it's hard to deal with it. It is very painful. But I don't want your insecurities to steal your identity. I don't want your insecurities to rob you of your light. I don't want your insecurities to foreshadow or forecast what your life should be. It's hard reprogramming yourself. It's something that's needed if you have been through certain traumas in your life. If you've been through a difficult childhood, if you didn't know how to find your voice, if you didn't know who you were. And I remember having all this faith and still holding on to my fears. It didn't feel comfortable holding on to my fears, but fear was like a base root in my childhood. I especially learned fear from the church, because everything was like, you're basically going to hell if you do this, if you do that, if you don't live a certain way. And if one doesn't, the scripture says, study to show yourself approved. So you must know the Most High for yourself and not for what another person says the Most High is. you have to study yourself, fast yourself, learn yourself. And I kept thinking throughout the years that, oh my goodness, if I just do a certain fast, then I'm going to be over all this pain, all this trauma, all this hurt, all this negative programming. And I realized that it's an ongoing process. Um, I'm saying a lot and kind of losing track, but what I want to essentially say is don't let your insecurities steal your identity. Whatever you feel insecure about, you have to just deal with it. If you can't change it, you have to allow yourself to embrace it. And a lot of the insecurities in our life, we can change. Like my weight, even when I was like, doesn't matter what size I was, I always remembered being the fat kid and being told that. So it doesn't matter how small I get in this life, it seems like that's always kind of a piece of me. But it genuinely does not define me. But it's an insecurity, if I'm being honest. So whatever you have, all I'm saying, I'm trying to say this just without sugarcoating any of my words. I hate that. I hate that I ever sugarcoated anything I ever had to say. I hate that. But what I want to say is, no matter what your insecurity is, don't let that define you. Don't let that drive you. And don't let that dictate how you're going to operate and move in this life. I wish I could tell the 20-year-old Constance this. Because when I did put out my CD, I would have went a little harder. I wish I could have told the 30-year-old Constance this. So when I was dating certain men, I would have cut them off at the first date. It's easier to cut someone off at the first date or the first call when you know what you deserve. Don't let your insecurities cause you to pick up that phone call. Don't let your insecurities cause you to answer that text. Don't let your insecurities drive you to a place that you don't deserve to be. We don't have to be delusional, but we can create a beautiful world in a realistic way. You can create peace. I have. You can create abundance. There's so much out there for you. You can fill your heart with love. And even though you may be insecure about certain things, don't let that stop you from walking with your head held high. Don't let that stop you from applying to that next job. Don't let that stop you from starting your new business. Because at the beginning and the end of the day, this is your time. What do you have now? Tomorrow's not promised. I know this message is kind of long, but all I want you to know is that we're all human. I don't want to ever pretend or try to be perfect anymore. But what I can and will continue to be is a strong, confident version of myself. Because everything, even the things that make me feel insecure about me, is beautiful. Because it's a part of me. It's a part of my story. It's a part of my journey. It's a part of my essence. Some of the most beautiful things about people are the things they feel insecure about. Don't let negativity speak to you. Stay in a positive mind frame. And if you feel a certain way, always remember who you are. Always remember that you are beautiful, that you are strong, that you are worthy, that you are powerful. This is coming from a broken soul. I'm on my way to being fixed, but I can honestly admit I am definitely not perfect. Peace, love, and many blessings.